I always thought I had it all figured out. My name is Amelia Hart, and if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you my life was perfect, or as close to perfect as anyone could hope for. I live in Willow Creek, Vermont, a small town where everyone knows your name, but not necessarily your business. My floral design studio, Blossom and Bloom, has become the go-to place for weddings, anniversaries, and even just because bouquets. But what really made my world feel complete was my family. There's my dad, Edward Hart, who taught history at the local college before retiring, my younger sister, Emily, who works as a freelance graphic designer, and Nathan, my husband of 8 years. At least, he was my husband. Back then, we were the picture-perfect couple, or so I believed. We hosted dinner parties, laughed over inside jokes, and dreamed about buying a lakeside cabin someday. Little did I know that beneath the surface of our idyllic life, cracks were forming. Cracks I refused to see until they shattered everything. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment things started to change, though I didn't realize it at the time. It began with little things. Nathan coming home later than usual, skipping Sunday brunches with my family, or forgetting details about projects I talked to him about endlessly. He said work was stressful, and I believed him because, well, why wouldn't I? Then there was Emily. She used to be my confidant, the person I called when life got overwhelming. Lately, though, she seemed distant, canceling plans last minute or brushing off my texts. I chalked it up to her being busy, but something felt off. Even Dad noticed. One evening, after Nathan excused himself early from dinner, claiming he had an urgent email, Dad gave me this look, a mix of concern and pity, that sent a chill down my spine. "People aren't always who we think they are, sweetheart," he said cryptically. At the time, I dismissed his words as ramblings of an old man stuck in nostalgia. How wrong I was. The tension between us grew thicker by the day, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. I tried talking to Nathan about it, but every conversation ended with him reassuring me that everything was fine. Fine. That word haunted me. Meanwhile, Emily kept finding excuses not to visit. When she finally came over one Saturday afternoon, I caught her sneaking into Dad's study while he napped upstairs. She froze when she saw me, stammering something about looking for a book. But I wasn't fooled. Later that night, I confronted Dad about it. His reaction surprised me. He didn't deny anything. Instead, he pulled out an old wooden box from his closet and placed it on the table. "Some secrets are better left buried," he warned, his voice low and serious. For the first time, I wondered what skeletons lurked in our family's past, and whether they were connected to the unraveling of my present. It happened on a Tuesday morning of all days. I was tidying up the kitchen when Nathan's phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't have glanced at it, but something compelled me to pick it up. What I found turned my world upside down. Text messages exchanged late at night, filled with affectionate words meant for lovers, not strangers. And the sender, Emily, my own sister. My hands trembled as I read through them, each message cutting deeper than the last. I confronted Nathan immediately, tears streaming down my face. He didn't even try to deny it. "Amelia, I'm sorry," he said, his voice hollow. "I never meant to hurt you." Hurt me? The betrayal burned hotter than anger. It consumed me. Before I could say another word, he packed a bag and left. Just like that, the man I loved walked out of my life and straight into my sister's arms. The days following Nathan's departure were a blur of shock, rage, and disbelief. I couldn't bring myself to speak to either of them. Every time Emily called, I ignored her. When Nathan texted asking to meet, I blocked his number. My once close-knit family fractured overnight. Dad tried to intervene, urging me to forgive them both. "Life's too short to hold grudges," he said gently. But how could I forgive something like this? They weren't just breaking my heart, they were tearing apart everything I held dear. To make matters worse, I learned through mutual friends that Nathan planned to marry Emily within months. Months. As if erasing 8 years of marriage was as simple as flipping a page in a book. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw things. Instead, I bottled it all up, letting the pain fester inside me. In the midst of my emotional chaos, I found myself drawn to the attic one rainy afternoon. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I was desperate for a distraction. Either way, I ended up opening that old wooden box Dad had shown me weeks earlier. Inside were letters, photographs, and newspaper clippings tied together with faded ribbon. One photo caught my eye, a young woman standing beside my father, her smile radiant. Her name, scrawled on the back, was Margaret. Who was she? Why did Dad keep these mementos hidden away? Determined to uncover the truth, I took the box downstairs and demanded answers. For the first time in my life, I saw fear flicker across Dad's face. You shouldn't dig into the past, Amelia, he warned. But I couldn't stop now. Not when my own life felt like it was crumbling around me. That night, Dad sat me down and told me a story I'll never forget. Decades ago, he fell in love with Margaret, a married woman whose husband wielded power and influence in their community. Their affair ended disastrously when Margaret's husband discovered the truth. Rather than face public humiliation, Dad fled town, leaving Margaret behind to deal with the fallout. Her life was ruined because of me, he confessed, his voice heavy with regret. And I've carried that guilt ever since. Hearing his story shook me to my core. Was this why he pushed me to forgive Nathan and Emily? Because he knew firsthand how destructive betrayal could be? As much as I wanted to hate them both, I couldn't ignore the pain in Dad's eyes. Maybe forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was survival. Dad's confession left me reeling, but it also sparked a fire within me. If he could survive such a scandal, then surely I could find a way to move forward. But first, I needed answers. I pored over the contents of the wooden box, piecing together fragments of Dad's past. Margaret's husband, it turned out, had been a ruthless man who silenced anyone who dared expose his secrets. The parallels between their story and mine weren't lost on me. Like Margaret, I felt trapped in a web of lies spun by those closest to me. Yet unlike her, I had a choice: let bitterness consume me or rise above it. The question was, which path would lead me to peace? I couldn't keep avoiding Emily forever. One evening, she showed up unannounced at my doorstep, her face pale and drawn. "We need to talk," she said softly, stepping inside before I could protest. The sight of her made my stomach churn. Her presence was a constant reminder of everything I'd lost. Still, I listened as she stumbled through an apology, claiming she never intended to hurt me. "Nathan was unhappy, Amelia," she insisted, her voice trembling. "He needed someone who understood him." Her words hit like daggers, but what stung most was the accusation buried beneath them, that somehow I had failed as a wife. "You think that gives you the right to steal him?" I shot back, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. She flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then she muttered something under her breath, something about how I always got everything I wanted. That's when I realized this betrayal wasn't just about Nathan. It was about jealousy, resentment, and years of pent-up frustration I hadn't seen coming. After my explosive confrontation with Emily, I needed space to breathe. That's when Oliver Hayes walked back into my life. We'd been friends in college, but after graduation we drifted apart. Now he was back in Willow Creek, working as a photographer for a local magazine. He stopped by my studio one afternoon, ostensibly to discuss collaborating on a project, but it quickly became clear he cared more about how I was holding up. "You've been through hell," he said gently, his hazel eyes filled with concern. "But you're stronger than you think." His kindness caught me off guard. In a world where everyone seemed intent on hurting me, here was someone who genuinely cared. Over coffee, we talked about everything: my crumbling marriage, my fractured family, even Dad's shocking confession. Oliver didn't offer solutions. He simply listened, his quiet support a balm to my battered soul. By the time he left, I felt lighter, as if sharing my pain had lessened its weight. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself obsessing over one question: what did I truly want? Closure? Justice? Or revenge? Digging deeper into Dad's past gave me clarity and ammunition. Margaret's husband hadn't just ruined lives. He destroyed reputations, silencing anyone who dared oppose him. Wasn't it poetic justice to do the same to Nathan and Emily? I imagined exposing their affair to everyone in town, watching as they faced the scorn and judgment they deserved. But every time I considered it, Dad's words echoed in my mind: "Revenge will only poison your soul." Still, the temptation lingered. Late one night, I drafted an email detailing their betrayal, addressed to mutual friends, colleagues, and even Nathan's boss. My finger hovered over the send button, my heart pounding. Would pressing it bring me satisfaction, or plunge me further into darkness? Instead of hitting send, I decided to gather undeniable proof of their deceit. It wasn't hard. Nathan wasn't exactly discreet. I accessed old bank statements, emails, and text messages, piecing together a timeline of their betrayal. Each discovery fueled my anger, but also clarified something important. This wasn't about love, it was about convenience. They weren't soulmates. They were cowards, hiding behind lies while destroying everyone else's trust. Armed with this evidence, I confronted them both in person. Nathan looked guilty, shifting uncomfortably as I laid out the facts. Emily, however, doubled down, accusing me of being melodramatic. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she snapped, crossing her arms defensively. Her denial infuriated me, but it also solidified my resolve. If they refused to take responsibility, then I would make sure the truth came to light, no matter the cost. Before I could act on my plan, Dad cornered me in the kitchen. His usually calm demeanor was replaced with urgency. "Amelia, listen to me," he said, gripping my shoulders. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but dragging this into the open won't fix anything. Trust me, I've lived it." His voice cracked as he recounted the aftermath of his own scandal. Friends turned against him, colleagues shunned him, and Margaret's life spiraled out of control. "Do you really want to carry that kind of guilt?" he asked, his eyes pleading. For the first time, I saw the toll his choices had taken, not just on others, but on himself. He wasn't trying to protect Nathan or Emily, he was protecting me. And yet, part of me still wondered if sparing them meant letting them win. The next morning, I woke up exhausted but strangely calm. Sitting at my kitchen table, I stared at the folder containing all the evidence I'd collected. Instead of feeling empowered, I felt empty. Was this really how I wanted to spend my energy? Fueling hatred instead of healing? I thought about Dad's memoir in progress, sitting untouched on his desk upstairs. He was finally confronting his past, not to punish himself, but to understand it. Maybe that's what I needed to do too. That afternoon, I called Lila Monroe, my best friend since childhood. Over wine and laughter, she reminded me of who I used to be, the girl who dreamed big, laughed loud, and refused to let anyone dim her light. By the end of the night, I knew what I had to do. Not for Nathan or Emily, but for me. Determined to close this chapter once and for all, I tracked down Margaret's surviving relatives. It wasn't easy. She passed away years ago, but eventually I found her daughter, Claire, living in Boston. Meeting her was surreal. She looked so much like her mother, with the same radiant smile captured in the faded photograph. Over tea, I apologized for my father's role in her family's downfall. To my surprise, Claire forgave him without hesitation. "People make mistakes," she said simply. "What matters is whether they learn from them." Her grace moved me to tears. As we talked, I realized forgiveness wasn't about excusing wrongdoing, it was about freeing yourself from its grip. On the drive home, I felt lighter, as if a weight I'd carried for months had finally lifted. With newfound clarity, I began repairing the relationships I still valued. Dad and I worked side by side on his memoir, turning painful memories into lessons for the future ourselves. It wasn't easy. There were moments when old wounds reopened, but slowly we healed. Meanwhile, Oliver continued to be a steady presence in my life. We spent weekends exploring the countryside, sharing stories under starlit skies. Though I wasn't ready to call it love, I appreciated having someone who believed in me when I struggled to believe in myself. Even Emily reached out again, this time with genuine remorse. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she wrote in a letter, "but I hope someday we can find a way to move forward." Reading her words, I felt a flicker of hope. Forgiveness might take time, but reconciliation wasn't impossible. On the day of Nathan and Emily's wedding, I chose not to attend. Instead, I invited close friends and family to celebrate my resilience at my studio. Surrounded by flowers and laughter, I raised a toast to new beginnings. "Life doesn't always go as planned," I said, smiling through tears, but sometimes the detours lead us to places we never expected. As the sun set over Willow Creek, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This wasn't the life I'd envisioned, but it was mine, and I was determined to make the most of it. In the weeks following Nathan and Emily's wedding, I made a conscious decision to focus on myself. The pain of their betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed me. Instead of dwelling on what I'd lost, I poured my energy into rebuilding my life, starting with Blossom and Bloom. I expanded the studio, adding workshops and community events that brought people together. Watching others find joy in creating something beautiful reminded me of why I fell in love with floral design in the first place. It wasn't just about flowers, it was about connection, growth, and renewal. At the same time, I worked on letting go of bitterness. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what they'd done. It meant releasing the hold their actions had over me. Some days were harder than others, but each small step felt like progress. Dad's memoir became a turning point for our family. Titled Shadows and Light, it chronicled his affair with Margaret, the fallout, and the lessons he learned along the way. Editing the manuscript alongside him was both heartbreaking and healing. For the first time, I saw him not just as my father, but as a flawed human being who had made mistakes and tried to make amends. When the book launched at a local bookstore, I stood beside him as he read excerpts to a packed room. Listening to him speak openly about his regrets inspired me to confront my own. Afterward, a woman approached us, tears streaming down her face. "Your story gave me the courage to forgive someone I thought I never could," she said, clutching the book to her chest. In that moment, I realized Dad's vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was his greatest strength. And maybe mine could be too. As much as I enjoyed my independence, there were moments when loneliness crept in. That's when Oliver stepped up, not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency. He showed up after long days at the studio with takeout and a listening ear. He sent me playlists filled with songs that reminded him of me. Slowly, without even realizing it, I began to rely on him, not out of need, but because he made life brighter. One crisp autumn evening, as we strolled through the park hand in hand, he turned to me and said, "I know you're still healing, and I don't want to rush anything. But I care about you, Amelia, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time." His honesty caught me off guard, but it also felt right. For so long, I'd been afraid to open my heart again. Yet here was someone willing to wait, to meet me where I was. Maybe love wasn't about perfection, it was about partnership. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. Just when I thought I'd moved past the anger, Emily appeared at my door one rainy afternoon. She looked different, smaller, somehow, as if carrying the weight of her guilt. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I miss you. I miss us." Her words brought back a flood of emotions: anger, sadness, longing, but also a flicker of compassion. I invited her inside, and for the first time in months, we talked honestly. She admitted she'd acted out of jealousy, feeling overshadowed by my success and happiness. Hearing her admit this didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me understand her motives. By the end of the conversation, I found myself saying something I never thought I would. I'm not ready to forget what happened, but I'm willing to try to start over slowly. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was a beginning. With each passing day, I felt more grounded, more like myself again. My relationship with Oliver blossomed into something steady and real, built on trust and mutual respect. Dad's memoir gained traction, sparking conversations about forgiveness and redemption far beyond Willow Creek. Even Emily and I found a fragile peace, reconnecting over shared memories and tentative laughter. Meanwhile, whispers reached me about Nathan and Emily's marriage. They weren't as happy as they'd hoped. Part of me wanted to gloat, to say, "I told you so." But instead, I chose empathy. Their choices had consequences, just as mine did. Life is messy, complicated, and unpredictable, and sometimes the only thing we can control is how we respond. As winter gave way to spring, I planted new flowers in my garden, symbolizing growth and renewal. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was one I was learning to cherish. At Dad's second book event, a signing for Shadows and Light, I stood before a crowd of strangers and friends alike, sharing my thoughts about his journey and mine. "What I've learned," I said, gripping the microphone tightly, "is that pain has a way of teaching us who we are. It strips away the facades we build and forces us to confront the truth, not just about others, but about ourselves. Forgiveness isn't easy, but it's necessary. Without it, we remain trapped in the past, unable to move forward. As I spoke, I glanced at Dad sitting in the front row, his eyes shining with pride. Beside him sat Oliver, smiling warmly. For the first time in years, I felt whole, not because everything was perfect, but because I had embraced imperfection. Life wasn't about avoiding storms. It was about learning to dance in the rain. Oliver and I decided to take a trip to Europe to celebrate the launch of Dad's book. It was my first time leaving Willow Creek since everything fell apart, and stepping onto foreign soil felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. We wandered cobblestone streets, explored ancient ruins, and savored meals that lingered on our tongues and in our memories. Back home, news trickled in about Nathan and Emily's struggles. They argued constantly, their once passionate romance fading into resentment. While I felt a pang of sadness for them, I also recognized the stark contrast between their path and mine. Their choices had led to chaos, mine to clarity. Sitting on a balcony overlooking the Amalfi Coast, I realized I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was embracing my future, one breathtaking sunrise at a time. By the time we returned to Willow Creek, summer had settled over the town, painting everything in golden hues. My studio buzzed with activity, Dad's memoir continued to inspire readers, and my friendship with Emily grew stronger, though cautiously so. As I reflected on everything I'd endured, I came to understand that betrayal, while devastating, also offered an opportunity to redefine yourself, to discover resilience you didn't know you possessed. Nathan and Emily's actions may have broken me, but they also pushed me to become someone braver, kinder, and more self-aware. Standing in my garden amidst blooming flowers, I whispered a silent thank you to Dad for his wisdom, to Oliver for his patience, and even to Nathan and Emily for forcing me to confront truths I might otherwise have ignored. Life isn't fair, but it's precious, and every scar tells a story worth telling.